Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is Monday evening, December 12th, a little after 9 p.m. Eastern. That means it is time for the Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined up top here by David Griggs and David Dorman. Down below me, John Stalika. At his side, we got John Teitel and Joby Fortson. Full cast here to discuss everything that's been going on in college basketball on the court and off the court, unfortunately, today as well. And maybe that's where we need to start this evening's show is with what has happened just in the less than 24 hours now at Texas, where by all accounts, Chris Beard was arrested about 2 o'clock in the morning for a incident where there's now a charge against him for a felony attempt to assault and strangle another person who is a member of his family. He has been released on bail early this afternoon. He has been suspended indefinitely by the University of Texas. Rodney Terry took over there, and you are innocent until proven guilty. But this is, if anything close to what they're alleging is true, this is just absolutely, an awful incident by a guy who was one of the stars of the coaching world until less than 24 hours ago.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It's really senseless, and I don't think he'll coach again at Texas and maybe anywhere else anytime soon. As far as how it impacts them at the time we're recording this, they're losing at home to Rice. So I don't think that this was a good thing on the court or off the court, but most importantly, you just sort of feel for the victims and they hope they get through this. But if I'm Texas, you just want to move on.
Yeah, you want. I think you got to. I mean, obviously, again, Teitel, innocent until proven guilty. But and if it turns out, as Beard's attorney is already saying, as any attorney who's representing Beard would be saying, is that this never happened. My client's 100% innocent. But if it turns out that there is something here, I agree with Griggs and that should probably be the end of his career for a while, at least for quite a while.
I mean, in a moral universe, sure, I get that, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of coaches behaving badly who are still in this sport. So I would be surprised. Number one, if he comes back to coach this year, I agree, he's probably done for the year. Number two, I think he'd be back in the future. It might take a while, and it might not be at Texas level, but I think that good coaches somehow find a way through the murk and dirt to make it back, because schools care about winning. They should be caring more about the morality stuff, but I think some of them care more about winning.
Yeah, there are definitely coaches out there that have had issues that have come back. Looking at guys like Billy Gillespie, I'm looking at guys like Sean Woods, Joby. There are names out there that went through trouble and do come back, but it's a long road back for guys like that.
Yeah, I think it will happen. I think he will happen. I mean, the best example, I think the path of a Hugh Freeze, if those who are familiar with football, some not exact apples to apples, but similar type, along with cheating scandal as well. He had to resuscitate. There's going to be for lack of a better word, ask of forgiveness that will go through, and then he'll go to a place like a Liberty that Hugh Freeze did in football. And if he performs at that, level, then just as it did with Hugh Freeze now at Auburn, a school looking for that great move, I wouldn't be surprised if within 3 years we see Chris Beard at the Power 5 level again.
I could see it happen if he still has the ability to, especially to recruit after this. That there could be,
and I might add, I'm not saying, I support that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just giving an analysis similar to John of where I think things will go. I won't go into obviously the details because it's just reports right now. But what is being reported with evidence, with what's being reported as not just a he said, she said, but other components. Physical evidence sort of components. This is on all its face, it looks extremely bad. And so I don't see him coming back, at Texas at all this year, especially at a school like Texas. for all the endowment and, sports that Texas does, they actually have a pretty strong compunction against this sort of thing.
Yeah,
We are going to talk about a lot more than this tonight.
I just want to stress, in my life outside of college basketball, I am an attorney. Now, I don't do criminal law. I don't do family or domestic violence disputes or anything like that. But I've had enough interaction with these types of scenarios to know that there are situations where things are made up. That's why you got to look beyond into physical evidence. But from the reports that we've read, there was physical evidence of this beyond just that's being reported beyond just he said, she said type of thing, like Joby mentioned. But let's move on to the actual sport of college basketball, what happened on the court, and what's happening on the court right now, even. Let me pull up the screen share here. And Dorman, let me bring you in to start here. As we're bringing up the Big 12 standings, it is the conference that Texas is in. Although they are struggling right now. But should we start at the top with Kansas, who picked up the win in the easy win in the border war over a previously a Missouri team that's previously undefeated?
They were previously undefeated. Yes, Chad, let's start at the top. Kansas went in to Missouri and absolutely rolled them this weekend. They looked really good, but the point was, I'm not sure Missouri was tested or ready for this kind of competition.
I'm quite certain they were not ready for this competition.
Kansas blew the doors out. They were up 20 early, didn't look back, and Kansas was better in every facet of the game. Missouri never even made a push to get it competitive. And I think Missouri will, water finds its weight, I believe is the term. And as the competition starts to rise, I think they will start to sink.
Right. And Stalika, let me bring you in here as well. TCU back in the polls here this week at 21 and 22 in the polls. I think they really have rebounded from the rough start to the season.
We're talking about a competitive rivalry that we were hoping for. The border war? Nope. The Cy-Hawk Trophy? Nope. The Iron Skillet? Yes, that would be TCU narrowly beating their area rival SMU right here. So they just have the one blip on the radar against Northwestern State.
I think maybe the surprise of the conference title, though, is Kansas State sitting here at 9-1. Although they beat Abilene Christian and was it a Incarnate Word this week?
They have some weight. Pull them up, Chad. I mean, it's not all home buy games, but it's nothing.
Your name is not Titel, but go ahead.
Yeah, just making that point.
Thank you. So you know how I feel about first-year coaches, but I got to give it up for Jerome Tang. There is nothing super impressive on the resume so far, but a 9-1 record with only a road loss at Butler is still very good. They get Nebraska in Kansas City this weekend, Radford next week, then conference play starting New Year's Eve, 3 tough games in 8 days. Host West Virginia, at Texas, at Baylor. But the Keontae Johnson comeback story, it's turning into a movie script. He plays 4 games in the fall of 2020, near fatal on-court collapse, didn't play last year, transfers to Manhattan, looks as good as ever, 17 points, 6 boards a game. And when did he learn how to shoot? 15 of 30 behind the arc.
Yeah, Joby, I also pulled up West Virginia there on the right, and this is one of the teams that it's just been surprising me all season. I did not expect anything out of this team, and they keep winning games.
Now that all 3 of their tier 2 wins, let's just look at that resume, are counterfeit tier 2 wins, and you could argue.
I like the UAB win, actually. I liked what they did against UAB this week.
Yeah, but UAB, I don't think is the UAB of the last few years. I really, really don't think UAB is who UAB has been.
They're pretty. I think they're better than anybody else.
In Florida, when we get to the SEC, what in the heck has gone wrong with Florida? Yeah. Remember, this team barely beat Florida State, so that's something. Yeah. But I'm good for West Virginia. They've definitely rebounded from the just malaise they've been in, kind of the funk they've been in the last few years, or at least 2 of the last 3 years. Give them credit. They're positioning themselves towards maybe a bid, depending how the Big 12 season goes. Because man, you get wins in this conference, they're going to be all of a sudden that you're not going to have counterfeit tier 1 and tier 2 wins.
I'm the Xavier alum of the group. I warned you people in the preseason podcast, do not underestimate Bob Huggins.
Mhm.
That being said, are they going to go to the same path that Iowa State did last year where they regress towards the mean as far as conference play goes?
There's a lot of good games coming up this weekend. Although not so much involving Big 12 teams, other than we've got to circle this Indiana Kansas game on Saturday, Griggs. This is there's I think Titel, I think you said there's like 6 or 7 matchups of top 25 teams against each other on Saturday. Indiana, Kansas, I believe being one of those, correct? Is Indiana still the top 25?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, Griggs, you had a comment on it or no?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, just to emphasize your point, it's both teams in the rankings, both teams showing early signs of being a protected seed. It's a showcase game. It's a litmus test. It's the kind of game that if you want a protected seed, winning it certainly helps.
I'll tell you what, let's move on from the Big 12 and let's move to right now, as we're recording this, there are 7 undefeated teams left in the nation, 7 of them. 3 of those 7 are in our next conference, the Mountain West. Joby, your favorite conference,
My
the Mountain
favorite
West.
conference. What's crazy is, all right, so, and I mentioned this for those who read the website and see that David Griggs decided to help me out with the bracket using the JNG. And the JNG, this proves that when you write formulas, the best way is to make sure there's no personal bias involved. 6 Mountain West teams in, 6, 2 in the protected seed level.
That's great.
And so, the Mountain West, they did this last year, by the way. The JNG kind of overrated. They have clearly got the scheduling going on. They are finding the holes because you look at the JNG. Well, the Nets for those 6 teams is pretty freaking strong too. It's not like this is one off of their rigging and the resume. They're hitting the net as well, and so I think what this means is the Mountain West will not have 6 teams in March. They won't. But all of a sudden, a win over Boise that goes 500 in conference. Well, Boise probably won't make the field going 500 in conference. But you know what? If San Diego State beats Boise, that's a good win. Utah State beats Boise, it's a good win. New Mexico beats Boise, it's a good win. And so all of a sudden, I'm sorry to pick on Boise here. The whole conference is going to raise up, and you will see at least 3, assuming New Mexico and UNLV really don't have, I question their strength of schedule, is if UNLV and New Mexico don't completely fade into oblivion, you're going to see 3 teams out of this conference, I think, almost no matter what.
Well,
let me ask
one of the things you didn't mention San Jose State, who is clearly, I think, the best team in it.
Titel, did mention UNLV, who's sitting there at the 10-0. This is probably one of the biggest shock of the 3 undefeated teams, in my opinion. This is this Vegas team.
Agreed. Coach Kevin Kruger in non-conference play last year, 8-5. So far, 10-0. Beat Washington State by 4 last weekend. Good news, he gets to rest this week. Bad news, they're going to need it. They get 8-2 San Francisco next Saturday, and then 9-1 Southern Miss the week after that. But the best player you've never heard of, sophomore guard Keyshawn Gilbert, who sadly chose the Rebels over many Pac-12 teams, including the Wildcats. He averaged less than 3 points a game off the bench last year. This year, he's exploded. 16 points a game, 4 assists a game, and even hotter than Keontae Johnson behind the arc, 17 of 30 from long range. Unreal.
Yeah, and when we talk about San Francisco being in there, interestingly enough, Dorman hasn't tipped yet. There's still a couple hours away from tipping actually tonight. A game that was added just about a week ago is this New Mexico-San Francisco game. So the Dons have a shot to knock off 2 undefeated teams here over the next week. But how about New Mexico there and what Richard Pitino's been doing?
I'm impressed with Richard Pitino. I wasn't as big a supporter in Minnesota, but he seems to have turned the ship around in New Mexico. They're playing really good basketball, and they're hitting shots, and their defense is just much better than in years past, and it was better than he was playing defense in Minnesota. Patino, he's really turned it up. The pressure is taking teams right out of their offensive flow, and he's jumping on these teams early. And I'm not the biggest Patino family guy, but I will say he's done a really nice job. His next two opponents, his dad, after the San Francisco game, his dad is coming in. Iona is going to play New Mexico, which will be on the court. Absolutely, I think a fantastic game.
That is.
And we want to talk about the third undefeated team here, Utah State. Stalika, talk about Iona. Iona could be playing both of these undefeated teams as well, as they and Utah State are in the same half of the bracket of the Diamond Head coming up in a week or so here.
Yeah, if we're looking at a team like Utah State, it's mostly going to be loaded with tier 2 and tier 3 wins here. Granted, most of those are going to be at home. Although one of their true road wins at San Francisco, you got to give them a lot of credit for them, even though it wasn't on their true home floor, but at the Chase Center, that's as good as a road game against the Dons right there.
Yeah, that might be the problem with these top teams here, is that we're missing, the power conference wins. We're missing, we get some West Coast conference wins, but the real, we're not seeing the wins over with these top teams over, Big 12 and Big 10 powerhouse type of teams.
Yeah. What I really want to see in that Utah or in that New Mexico versus Iona game is a blow by handshake at the end of the game. I think that would be phenomenal. We got to ask our selection committee guessing expert to analyze this. And I know it's early, but how many bids can this conference get?
They're not getting 6. It's way too early. I mean, if UNLV goes 29-1, they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to go 29-1. So I'll set the over under at 3, and I don't know which way to go.
Yeah, which is probably 1 or 2 higher than you were at the start of the season, Titel. So
3 higher.
3 higher.
That's my point. I agree with John 100%. It's not that it's 6; it's that they put themselves in position for those good wins. And
Right.
so you're just going to pile up better wins than expected. Hell, even San Jose State's got a reasonable, has a reasonable net here.
Yeah, and you want to look at it was San Diego State team, not even among these undefeated teams. It was still a team that I think we all believe maybe the best talent in this conference. Colorado State and Wyoming were both really good last year. Wyoming's been without their star player all season, but he's could be back by January, and they could be a force in conference play. There's depth here in this league.
And you got San Jose State, who I think is the best team.
Moving on, anyhow, to the where we're going. Let's talk about the top of the nation here. Let's talk about the new number 1 team in the nation here, and that would be the Purdue Boilermakers. Dorman, they are sitting here 10-0, did come in number 1, not unanimous in terms of first place votes, but did win. We're number 1 in both polls this week.
Yes, Purdue has looked the part, played the part. The games in Portland in the film night, I just can't get out of my head. I mean, they just ran over the competition. I don't want to go over it again because I've said it so many times. And I'm going to take it to Zach Edey. Coming into the year, if you would have told me he was going to be in the running for Player of the Year, I probably would have said I just don't see it. I can't believe it. At this point right now, he has my vote. Every game he plays in, he is a major factor. He is defensively a force, and scoring, he has nice touch. He's worked on his game around the rim. To me, he's the Player of the Year. Purdue's riding him. Their guard play is excellent. Painter has his guys playing really great basketball today.
Yeah, but are you at all concerned that they really struggled with the game at Nebraska, or was it just because it was a road game?
Road game in conference. You can't be up for everything. We saw Arizona go to Utah and lose. We've seen all these top teams after some great wins come back and come down to life for a little struggle. But Purdue's going to be at the top of this Big Ten all year long. They're not going to lose many games, and I see easy protected seed for Purdue, if not on the 1 or 2 line.
Titel, how about the Wisconsin Badgers beating a previously undefeated Maryland team, then a nice road win at Iowa this week?
Stealing my thunder, but you're 100% correct. So, no, they finished November losing 2 of 3, so I wasn't sure, but great in December. Marquette, Maryland, Iowa, back to back to back. They get 3 cupcakes to finish this month, which is good because they played 7 straight games decided by 5 or less.
Pull them up, Chad.
So they could use some relaxing holiday blowouts. and they get Minnesota in a very winnable game to start January. Then 3 Tier 1A games: Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana, back to back to back. The star, you talked about guys like Edey, the big man, the senior Tyler Wall, 15.7 boards a game. Unfortunately, 3 of 17 behind the arc. Stop shooting threes.
I just love this profile. But, okay, yeah.
Griggs, what about the profile over here on the right? The Penn State Nittany Lions, big win at Illinois. Are you suddenly paying attention?
Yes, and suddenly is the key word. Without that, I would say that it's a profile that doesn't stink, but that is certainly not a team that has done anything that would indicate they're going to land inside the bubble. With that Illinois win, it is holy crap. They went into Illinois and just blew them off the floor, and you almost wonder where it came from. Nothing they had done is I would say that they had played somewhere between decent and good for a lot of the year, but nothing that they had done indicated that they were going to do that. That was remarkable. And I don't know if that was an anomaly. I don't know if it was just their night. If they can play like that all year, they're gonna make quite a bit of noise in this league.
Joby, I'm not even sure where else we want to go in this.
Oh, the answer is anomaly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I want to look at that Illinois team. I think that Illinois team, they played the Texas team with Chris Beard, and they went in and they showed what I think this Illinois team is outstanding. I really do. I think the Penn State loss was, I watched that game. It was just confusing.
They lost by 3 at Maryland. That is a hard place to play.
Right.
And
it was by 5, but go ahead.
I said 5.
But I think this Illinois team, they have a lot of the components. I love the way they play defense in particular, and then can change it up, and go on the breakout if need be. This Illinois team, and they showed it at Texas, a full strength Texas, ready to go. They went in and just took it to the horns. And I gotta give maybe they flew like Icarus too high to the sun, and they had to come down with an awful performance against Penn State. But that's the only awful performance I've seen out of them this year.
Yeah, I think I gotta give 2-3 seconds on my Rutgers Scarlet Knights here as well. Real tough week. First of all, with the loss against Ohio State, a game that they could have won, they should have won.
Should have is the key for it. Yes.
A really bad choice to foul up 3 with 5 seconds left, which really opened the door for Ohio State to steal that game from them. Even if it was a miracle shot that won the game for the Buckeyes at the buzzer. And then on top of that, just letting Seton Hall control the tempo last night in their game, and Seton Hall just played Seton Hall's game and took Rutgers out of it. And I thought the problem here with the Scarlet Knights is you don't have a Geo Baker or Ron Harper this year. You don't have somebody to make the big shot at the key moment. And without that guy, unless, Cam Spencer or Paul Mulcahy become that guy, I am concerned about this team in such a deep and such a difficult Big Ten here this season. Griggs, you had a thought on them or no?
I agree with what you said. I was really impressed with what they did at Miami and at Ohio State. I know both.
And the home game against Indiana, the home win over Indiana was very nice,
and the home win over Indiana. And I had said in the write-up that I thought, well, this is a top 25 caliber team. Their record isn't there yet, but if they keep playing like that, they're going to get there. It's sort of eating glass when you lose a game the way that they did at Ohio State. But that one, the one that gave me pause wasn't so much that one. I attributed that to bad luck and then maybe make a different decision next time. But they should have, I don't know about blown out, but they shouldn't have had to sweat out Seton Hall, much less lose to them. That was a little bit of a surprise.
Here's the rest of the upcoming schedule. It is, finals week for a lot of these schools. So that's why there's not much during the week, except a very interesting game here. Dorman, Wednesday night, UCLA is going cross country to UCLA of the East, right?
Maryland with quite the schedule. Yes, out of conference Tennessee yesterday, and then UCLA is coming to town Wednesday night. Let's see if they can split them. They came out of the box the first half yesterday against Tennessee, and they were ice cold. So they dug themselves a big hole. But the last 10 minutes, they really dug in, and they had a chance with a minute or two to actually steal the game. They couldn't get all the way back. Tennessee ended up winning by a couple points. But I liked this Maryland team coming into the season. I got a lot of heat on the preview show, but I love Kevin Willard. He gets his guys to do what he wants, and he plays to their strengths. And I like this Maryland club, and they're playing well. It's a great test, and then they're going to go into Big Ten play. But they've set the tone, and if they continue to play like this, they'll find themselves in the tournament.
Oh God, yeah, they'll find themselves on the 3 line.
Yeah. The other games, no, we already mentioned the Kansas game. Of course, Ohio State, North Carolina. That's part of that CBS Sports doubleheader, I think, on Saturday here. North Carolina preseason #1. Not a single vote in this week's top 25 poll.
That's remarkable.
They got one vote in the coaches.
They got one vote in the coaches poll. There we go.
Literally one vote.
Well, Joby, let me go over to your team here. Let's jump over to the ACC. Your Virginia Cavaliers, #2 in both polls this week, even though they had more first place votes in the coaches poll than Purdue did, still came in second place by the full rankings. But undefeated, one of the few undefeated teams left.
Yeah, and as we all know, it's not been an easy schedule to get to that point. So give them credit that, just like for Purdue, deserves it where they are in Connecticut. All three of those teams have played a pretty good schedule to get to their undefeated. Virginia got lucky this past in the past little bit to still be undefeated. Game past close wins, the most recent being over JMU and Florida State, two teams, though JMU is a solid team. No, not a team you should sweat to that level. And Florida State's just not good this year. That showed how important Reese Beekman is to this team. They are a different team without Reese Beekman. Reese Beekman went down with a hamstring injury, missed most of the Florida State game, played like 4 minutes against JMU before re-aggravating it. We're going to see. I bet you he misses the game that we'll all talk about very shortly against Houston, and the game at Miami next week. So that'll give him 3 weeks to rest, and we'll see, because Virginia is not a top 5 team without him. They're a tournament team without him. They are not a top 5 team without him.
Right. And we are actually starting to finally see a little bit, not called depth, but a little bit more out of the ACC than, at the beginning of the season was, okay, North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, and a bunch of garbage. But looking at the polls this week, at least, Titel, we've got Duke, we got Vatek in there, and we've got that 10-1 Miami Hurricanes cracking both the polls.
How is Miami not in there before now?
Apparently NIL money works. They beat NC State at home last Saturday. They get a home cupcake this weekend, and then Virginia heads south on December 20th for the big one. Their only loss so far is to the Dorman Darling Maryland Terps at a neutral site, and they have great offensive balance. 4 starters scoring between 11 and 17 a game. Jim Larinaga got this done via the transfer portal. They got Jordan Miller from George Mason last year. They brought in 2 more studs this year, Nigel Pack from Kansas State, and our second favorite Chad is Norchad Omier from Arkansas State. If they beat Virginia, I'll start believing in them. But if you think I'm going to put them in the top 10 after beating Cornell 107-105 at home last week, that's one of the least impressive wins I've seen all year. Come on.
But it was the greatest game I've seen all year. It was phenomenal.
A little lack of defense in that game. Stalika, how about Hokies, Virginia Tech in the top 25 as well?
Well, Virginia Tech certainly made Dayton look like one of their teams from the 90s, where they were winning maybe about 3 or 4 games a year. Now, granted, that says more about Dayton than it does Virginia Tech at this point. By the same token, we're also talking about a Tech team that still smashed North Carolina just a few days earlier prior to that.
And yesterday they went over Oklahoma State as well, so don't throw that out.
Penn State win looks good. The only loss is the College of Charleston. I think this Virginia Tech team is very underrated. I think they're going to be in the top 3 or 4 of this ACC all year long. And this is a team to watch out for. This team is really good. Mike Young has a really good basketball team.
Yeah, and College of Charleston is actually, it's under the radar, so we won't see them in the J&G.
Right. In
the J&G, they are in the at-large field, their resume. So they're 20th in the J&G. So a loss to COC is not embarrassing by any stretch.
Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
like losing to Louisville.
College of Charleston, I mean, we could be talking about them we've said it for like 2 weeks now that they might be cracking the top 25. They are inch closer. They missed it by
27th,
27th.
they
They should have been in 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's still not quite there yet.
I would like to point, or before we move on, right before we move on, I want to make an observation. Are we about to move on?
I was about to move on. Go ahead.
Okay, well, we have a very interesting scenario building here where not only is Louisville competing for the Stallings, they might be competing for the centenary with Cal. We've never had that before.
Louisville sitting here at
Non under the radar teams.
360 in the net.
362 strength of record,
you know,
360 in the net.
We have a rule that if an under the radar team is in the top 25, we deal with it on this show instead of the under the radar show of either of the polls.
Yeah.
But I think we may need a rule to deal with Louisville on the under the radar show. There's the ACC can stay here, but
Yeah.
they are hosting.
I had to add under the radar.
Yeah.
I had to add one little factoid to the Puppets notes from yesterday. There are only 2 winless teams in all of Division One. Louisville is one of them, and we will get to Cal later on.
Yeah,
Is that right?
They're
That
the
is
only
correct.
winless. Now quite a few of those teams with one or two win do have only non-D1 wins. So if you go versus D1, it's about a 10 or so teams still, but that might change soon. There's the upcoming schedule, including Louisville hosting Western Kentucky and circling on Saturday, hosting Florida A&M, a team that may actually be worse than them. One of the few teams in the nation that may be worse than them.
That is the centenary spotlight game.
Okay, let's keep things rolling here.
Well, we all know what's happening on Saturday. At
the Houston, Virginia
one
game.
game.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can wait till the American and talk about it if you'd like.
Yeah.
I think we need to have a separate contest for Saturday. Is Louisville, Florida A&M going to get more fans, or is Miami, Ohio, and Bellarmine going to get more fans?
Don't know. That's a good.
Let's jump to the
Bellarmine.
SEC. Let's jump to the SEC first. And Tytel, let me ask you about the other undefeated team that nobody's talking about. How about Mississippi State?
Pull them up.
Let's start talking about them. 9-0, 3-point neutral site wins, a pair of them over Marquette and Utah last month. They're looking very nice. They get 2 cupcakes this week, then a very interesting neutral site game against Drake in Nebraska. And my first year coach, Chris Jans, I got to interview him a couple months ago. Super nice guy, and he's getting it done on the court, even better than expected. And this is a guy who went 122-32 over the past 5 years at New Mexico State, who we are not talking about tonight. His team cannot make a free throw to save its life, 64% at the line. Good news, they don't need to because their interior defense, 39% allowed from 2-point range, is number 2 in the nation. And only 2 of their wins have been by single digits, so they're not getting burned at the free throw line in a close game. Unlike some teams with scoring balance, this team has a super duper star, senior big man Tolu Smith, 17 points, 9 boards, shoots 62% from the field. Keep feeding the big man because it's working.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other teams besides Mississippi State that deserve some serious discussion here. At Dorman, you touched about them a little bit earlier. Let's go back to Tennessee again. That real nice win over Maryland. This team is looking pretty darn good so far.
I love this Tennessee team. I love this Arkansas team. Tennessee looks really good. I think people jumped on them with the loss to Colorado. Everyone's going to have rough losses along the way. We saw Illinois not show up. Arizona didn't show up in Utah. It's hard to win. It's hard to be up for every game when you're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. I think Tennessee is as talented and as athletic as anyone in this conference. This is going to be one of my favorite conferences to watch all year. And I'm not an SEC guy, but I love the top 5 or 6 teams in this conference. Tennessee had a nice win yesterday against Maryland. They fell asleep a little in the second half. But Rick Barnes is doing a nice job. I'm high on the Volunteers.
And Joby, how about the Crimson Tide?
Boy.
Win at Houston. Wow.
I actually think that's we always say, best win of the year candidate, best win of the year. Best win of the year. I mean, because I think Houston was may still be very legit number 1 type team. And now Sasser was not, Sasser didn't play the full, game here. So that is a little asterisk. But you walk into Houston, when they take these out of conference showcase games, if you look in the past at Houston's record in these games, Houston doesn't just win these games, they dominate them because they put all the effort into it and they go resume builder, boom. And that's why we're going to be a top 2 or 3 seed in March. Alabama proved that they may be that top 2 or 3 seed team in that game. And the overall resume, as you'll see, as Chad's pulling up, it's strong. It is absolutely. A loss to Connecticut. Really, we're not going to knock them too much on a neutral loss there. So
look at the out of conference coming, Joby. Memphis and Gonzaga are up next. It's incredible.
Give Nate Oates credit, man.
Yes.
This
yes.
is how you build, because and we mentioned it on a few weeks ago when they played at South Alabama. That is not an easy game. I mean,
no.
The in-state, and give Nate Oates just ain't afraid of anybody. Give him credit.
And you're going to get more. You're going to get credit for. There's a couple other wins down the chart here, even that you got to give a little extra credit to. Liberty is probably going to be a tournament team. Longwood is probably the best team in their conference. South Dakota State might be the best team in their conference. They didn't play the bottoms of these under the radars, other than when they play their Jackson State game coming up. But other than that,
did they go to Liberty last year? I want to say they did. Like, that's the other thing. He's not afraid to go and play at a South Alabama or at a top level under the radar school.
Had most of the crowd. Everybody thinks, it's in Mobile. Alabama will fill that stadium.
Well, you look at this; they're already the number 19 non-conference strength of schedule, with Memphis and Gonzaga still to come. So
yeah,
incredible.
Anyway, the football coach at Alabama doesn't schedule like this. I kind of wish they did. But is the one quick question: is that win at Houston the single most impressive win that any team has this year? I think that it is.
Yeah, I think that's where Joey started his talk off. Actually,
right. Yeah. Well, I was getting a drink.
Okay. Well, Slick, let me ask you about the team I pulled up on the right. Is it time to start paying a little attention to LSU at this point?
More quad 4 wins than Alabama. That's
yes.
Pretty impressive.
Well, beating Wake Forest in Atlanta as part of the quadruple header at the State Farm Center, that gives the Tigers a little bit of hope right here. Other than that, their best win was against Akron, which is not going to draw too many eyeballs right here. The Kansas State loss, I think, goes back to one of the exempt tournaments just prior to Thanksgiving.
Right, and here's the big difference: 19 versus 305.
10 to 15 the whole game and choked it away.
Yeah.
Wake's
lack of intent to schedule.
Yeah, the number 305 strength of schedule non-conference is not good for LSU here. Obviously, we've got everything that Kentucky's done as well, and everything that Arkansas has done, but we do need to keep things rolling along here. Quick look at the upcoming schedule. That big Memphis Alabama game coming up Tuesday night here. We've got Tennessee at Arizona on Saturday. We got Alabama, Gonzaga. We got Kentucky, UCLA. Even Texas A&M, Memphis is probably one we're scheduling. We're circling Auburn, USC on Sunday.
That's a big one.
This is a great weekend for SEC hoops, actually.
It really is. Yeah.
And keep in mind, Gonzaga is going to be in the mood for some revenge, because remember, the Bulldogs lost in Seattle against Alabama last year.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Let's jump over to the only team in the nation that did beat Alabama. Of course, we're talking about those UConn Huskies at 11-0. And Dorman, let me ask you about this UConn team, because I think there's a strong argument they should be the number 1 team in the nation, as the Net, as the Ken Palm, as the Sagarin, as the average of all the OAR, the average of all these metrics says they should be number 1.
Yes, I would not fight you. They've played the part. They look fantastic. Curley has his team playing really good basketball. Sonogo, the big man in the middle, is such a defensive presence. I talked about Edey before. This is definitely the year of the big men. Sonogo is dominating that paint. And when in college, if you're not going to be red hot from the 3, when you go inside and there's a defensive presence that he brings, it's hard to score. You don't get those easy looks. You don't get the layups. You don't get the dunks, the small, short jumpers. I think this Connecticut team is as good as the record shows. And they are going to have a real good chance to run through this Big East and have a regular season title here. Not going undefeated, but they are the team to beat in the Big East.
All they have left is conference play. That's the rest of their schedule here. Beginning Titel with a game at Butler coming up this week.
Yeah, so they've had some problems. They lost to Tennessee and NC State in the Bahamas. They lost to Penn State on the road, all excusable, I guess. But the Kansas State win is looking better and better every day. The good news, they did not lose at Cal last weekend, thank God. The bad news, the conference home opener against undefeated UConn. If you like big men matchups, Dorman just talked about Sanogo at 6'9". How about 6'11" Manny Bates, 14.7 boards on offense, 3 blocks a game on defense. It's going to be sensational. Coach Thad Matta, he hasn't looked this good since he led Ohio State to 7 straight tournaments back in the early 2010s. But it's not all about Manny Bates. Great offensive balance on this team. All 5 starters scoring from 11 to 15 points a game. So even if Sanogo can work Bates, there's still 4 other guys you can put the ball in the hoop.
Yeah, Thad Matta, very successful at Ohio State and in a short stint at Xavier before that, left the game because of health issues. He was having issues with his back. I'm impressed with what he's done this year. I really am. I didn't think Butler would be good at all. They are.
Yeah. Talk about teams that Joby, at the beginning of the season, everyone was talking about this Creighton team. They started out 6-0 and have now lost 4 straight games, including the BYU game, which is just a turn your nose up. And
they're in a funk. Because, the win against Arkansas is real. The win against Texas Tech is real. So it's not like they're, can they right the ship? Yes. I mean, the Big East, unfortunately, and there are other conferences that fit this as well, just hasn't done the job out of conference to get the number of quality wins that maybe you need. So Creighton needs to straighten it out now. They can't, playtime's over. And so can Creighton make a run, get to the top half of I would say top half is the most realistic top end for them. A protected seed is going to be very tough to get for them going forward unless they just go on a tremendous run. But yeah, I think they still can be a tournament team. But boy, you continue down this road that they're on. BYU, Nebraska. I know it's an in-state rivalry. Come on, you're the one who's little brother and should be more fired up. So yeah, I'm Creighton straight it out, or we're seeing the McDermott, fall apart, in December and January as opposed to February, what he used to do a few years back.
now they were with Sleeka. They were with out Big East Defensive Player of the Year, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and they're probably without him for the Arizona State game as well, right?
They are without him tonight as well, because as we record this, they're down 6 against Arizona State. It was just 2 hours prior to game time where they learned that Kalkbrenner would not be available to play, and also threw BYU for a loop briefly because their whole game plan was revolving around him. So in a roundabout way, is Kalkbrenner rounding up MVP votes for Big East Player of the Year here with his absence.
It's like, let me stick with you. Your Xavier Musketeers won the won a pot of what you people in Cincinnati call chili, although I think it's spaghetti with meat sauce. But the crust out shootout game.
Gold Star is better.
Gold Star. No, I think you're both heathens, but if we're getting to the crosstown shootout right here, it was a tale of 2 halves right here. Xavier couldn't have played much better than they did in the first half. They got out to a 13-1 lead against UC, who was chucking up shots. It looked more like a Travis Steele selection from last year. But you fast forward to the second half after a pep talk from Kenyon Martin, who was in the house. UC suddenly got a lot more selective. They were getting more shot fakes. David DeJulius in particular was abusing the Xavier people guarding him. He even got a 4-point play towards the final 30 seconds of regulation, and Xavier fortunately had the last shot. Sule Boom was able to draw a foul. He hit 1 of 2 free throws, and curiously, Cincinnati called a timeout they did not have, because the reasoning here was instead of trying to take a running shot with under a second remaining, Wes Miller was willing to concede a couple points, and he tried to inbound the ball. What he did not count on was Jack Nungy, a 7-footer, guarding the inbounds pass, and he deflected it, and UC never got a shot off. So Xavier avoids disaster, but it is the first time in program history they've won 4 straight shootout games.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, and did they go to Gold Star to celebrate after the game?
Griggs, I was going to ask you about the upcoming schedule here, but maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah, well, we get in the conference play, Creighton and Marquette, kind of a pivotal game, especially for Creighton, especially if it continues to play out. We already talked about UConn Butler. Yeah, let's move on.
All right, let's move on then.
DePaul Northwestern, a fun crosstown shootout.
Why don't we jump over to the former number one team in the nation, now number 4 and 5 in the polls is Houston here in the American. We discussed their game already with the loss to Alabama, but Titel sitting now a lot better, coming off a very nice win we did not discuss already over Auburn. How about these Memphis Tigers?
They burned me last year, Chad. I hate to get on the bandwagon, but they are having a heck of a month. Home win over Mississippi, neutral site win over Auburn in Atlanta. And best of all, they have a perfect trap game opportunity on Tuesday in Tuscaloosa. You got Alabama coming off the road upset of the number 1 team in the nation last weekend. And then who does Alabama have this coming weekend on Saturday? Gonzaga and Birmingham. Perfect trap game. You heard it here first. They have a great veteran 1-2 punch. They got senior guard Kendrick Davis, 18 points, 5 assists a game on the outside. Inside, senior forward DeAndre Williams, 14 points, 8 boards a game. Big news today. Guard Demaria Franklin, he's been out all year with ineligibility issues. He was just ruled eligible today. He got a mental health waiver granted. I don't know that he's going to be enough to help them beat Alabama all by himself, but certainly isn't going to hurt.
I don't really know there's much more to even discuss in this conference besides these 2 teams at this point, especially with Tulane having been a little disappointing so far this season.
Yeah, Tulane's been disappointing. Let's give a brief shout out to UCF. I know that they're not all the way there yet, but I think they have the potential to make a little bit of noise in the league.
All right, they've got interesting games. They got a trip to Ole Miss, and they got a game against Missouri coming up this week. So
yeah, and if they win one or both of those, neither one of those are exactly like, protected seed caliber wins, but those are decent wins to go with a resume that's decent right now.
Let's go over to one Power 5 conference we've not discussed yet, and that's the Pac-12. Dorman, I know you're a Pac-12 guy. You're an Arizona guy, in fact, and had that nice win over Indiana. I think we discussed that briefly earlier already.
They looked fantastic Saturday night. Tubelis was awesome, getting down the court quick. Ballo underneath. Kerr was hitting some big threes. Yes, Arizona rebounded after the I don't even know what to call it. Awful performance in Salt Lake City against Utah. But like we've seen all season long, some of these teams coming off huge wins like Arizona did out in Maui, and then you have a letdown. But Arizona's playing the part. This team, I think, will be the top of the conference all year long. UCLA hasn't looked that strong yet. We're going to find out what they've got. They're going to go to Maryland on Wednesday night, I believe, and then they have the CBS Classic over the weekend. So we'll see if UCLA can come back after their showing in Las Vegas. The question mark, USC. Everyone and most of us thought this would be the 3rd team in the Pac-10, really not playing good basketball yet.
USC not playing good basketball. Joby, how about the Utes, though? Had that win over Arizona, and the profile is starting to look pretty darn nice.
Yeah, I'm looking right now that the J&G has 4 teams in right now. We all talk about Arizona. We all talk about UCLA. It's Utah that's the 3rd of the 4 right now. And it's because you got the road win at Washington State, which I actually really do like. And then the losses aren't that bad. Mississippi State win about. Sam Houston State has taken out Oklahoma and Utah. So it's not like it's outrageous. Yes, I think Utah, especially now that they have a marquee win, over Titel's crew, this Utah team is shocking. Now they could fall apart and be the preseason team we thought they'd be, but right now, give them credit for what they've achieved.
Yeah, I'll give them credit. Titel, Dorman mentioned UCLA a little bit. Big week for the Bruins here.
So I got to see them lose back-to-back single-digit games to the Illini and Baylor in Vegas last month. They're back on track, 5 straight wins. They might have the most difficult week ahead of anyone in the country. Road trip to Maryland, as Dorman mentioned on Wednesday. Then they face a little team called Kentucky in Madison Square Garden on Saturday. A nice group effort, but I want to single out senior forward Jaime Jaquez. He's been unstoppable during this winning streak. 20 points a game, 71% shooting from the field, 10 of 11 at the free throw line, 11 steals against only 3 turnovers. He's playing like an All-American.
And the team that I just can't get over, Griggs, is this Arizona State team. When they lost to Texas Southern to start
Yeah.
the season, I was ready. I was, Bobby Hurley's got a week left in the season before he gets fired. And here they are. They've won 7 in a row now. They are beating Creighton as we record this, an undermanned Creighton team, but they're winning the game as we record this.
Yeah. And I mean, that would probably be, at least on paper, their most impressive win to date, although it will be, noted that Creighton was not at full strength. But while nothing jumps off the page, the way it's not like they've beaten a protected seat on the road, I believe that's Colorado's only home loss. Michigan playing a lot better, probably at least they'll probably end up inside the bubble. That profile is looking pretty nice. And it's just one of those things that just not their night against Texas Southern, I guess. Because you take that out, that's a good looking team.
Yeah, it really is, and they've got a game against San Francisco coming up as well. Here's this week in the
big week for the
Pac-12.
Dons. We haven't talked about them yet.
Yeah, we'll get to them next. Actually, I was planning on going, but first, the next upcoming week in this conference, including the Tennessee at Arizona game on Saturday, and how about the Holy War as well on Saturday? Utah BYU, by the way.
Whew. Probably the most bitter rivalry in the country. It probably is. But that UCLA, like that Tennessee, I'm blanking. Who's Tennessee?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah, Tennessee Arizona game. Another one of those protected seed showcase games.
Right. Auburn USC, another one to circle here. Huge game for USC to try to pick up a.
Yeah, they win that one. It totally changes the complexion of their season, which could use some change.
Yes. Yeah.
Chad, you missed the best part about Arizona State's schedule. They had San Diego, San Francisco, and Arizona all back to back. Would the Seattle Seahawks have dragged down that schedule?
Let's jump over to the West Coast Conference, and we've got the Zags who are now at Joby. They're almost at an inconceivable number 15 in the nation. I don't think I ever remember seeing them in a double-digit ranking in the nation in recent years.
Well, and we talked about already, they're going to get their revenge game, against Alabama this weekend. Zags are fine. You see 7-3. Is anyone going to be shocked if at the end of the regular season it's whatever 27-3?
Not entirely. 27-4, certainly not.
I'll throw this out there as we record this. They're only up 6 at halftime over against Northern Illinois, though. So number 307 net Northern
Illinois. And they're
Illinois.
not playing as well, as they did last year. But I think there's 2 factors at play here that will help them. One is they do have out of conference, the strong that Kentucky win will only look better as time goes on. The losses, are very acceptable. And the West Coast Conference, while not awful by any stretch, it's a solid conference. I don't think it has the teams that traditionally can challenge the Zags. I think the Zags can run the table in this thing and not without too much problem.
Well, they do have to go to San Francisco. They do have to go to St. Mary's at Titel.
No, I think both are not as good. Well, San Francisco is about what they were last year. I do not think St. Mary's is as good as they were last year. So I think the conference as a whole, and BYU definitely, even with the win recently against Creighton, I think everybody's kind of down, including the Zags, but I think the Zags can take advantage of it, even though they haven't played at the same level that we saw, the last 2 seasons.
Well, do you agree with me about the Dons, Titel? We talked about their upcoming schedule already because they're on everybody's schedule, I think, that we've looked at so far.
They are. Joby says they're about as good as last year. He's probably right, but as you know, first-year coach Chris Gerlofson, so you never know what you're going to get. They were destroyed by Utah State to start the month. You'd think that'd be bad, but Utah State is 12th in the net, as Chad is showing us. So not that bad. And they bounce back versus Merrimack on Wednesday. And the reward is they get unbeaten in Vegas week. They get 9-0 New Mexico tonight at Michelob Ultra Arena, and then 10-0 UNLV on Saturday at the Thomas and Mack Center. Fortunately, they got one of the best senior backcourts in the nation. Tyrell Roberts and Khalil Shabazz, each scoring about 14 a game. And the team as a whole, very smart shot selection. They've only had 17 shots blocked all year by their opponents. So even if you're not making all of them, at least you're not getting them blocked. That's something.
Dorman, do you agree with Joby about St. Mary's being a little bit on the downside? I get they have 3 losses, but it was Houston and New Mexico in both close games,
I was beginning to get worried, yes, because of the losses. Like you said, Washington, New Mexico, and nothing wrong with Houston. But then they came away with a huge win over the weekend to San Diego State. I think that win will look better and better as the season goes, as they start to rise in the Mountain West. And Joby explained how solid the Mountain West is. I am not worried about St. Mary's. I think they had a bad stretch there of 10 days. So a few losses. I really like Randy Bennett's squad, and I think they will be a factor come March.
All right. Here's the upcoming schedule real quick for the West Coast Conference. Salika, anything else you're looking forward to this week that we haven't discussed?
I would be looking at LMU as a team that's quietly cracked into the top 100, at least as far as the net goes. They're going to be hosting Cleveland State on Sunday. That's going to be a winnable game for them, but like many other teams in the NCAA, they're going to be going through finals week, so not as much going on midweek here.
Yeah, kind of an interesting game. We talked about it earlier, Colorado State at St. Mary's, but the game Pacific on Saturday just has no chance. I mean, probably their toughest game of the year against San Jose State and 10 miles.
Well, we got one other conference to get to. This conference at least had one team receiving top 25 votes this week. Of course, that was Mississippi Valley State. We're talking SWAC, aren't we?
Okay, so have we relegated the Atlantic 10?
Okay. I just pulled it up here.
Credit for the win at Vandy. Seriously,
Mississippi Valley State, as you can see there, 1-9 overall, did receive an AP top 25 vote this week. Somebody that meant to vote for Mississippi State and voted Mississippi Valley, but I think
Mississippi Valley ahead of North Carolina in the poll.
They were voted number 22 by a pollster by mistake.
The pollster meant to vote Mississippi State, hit Mississippi Valley State instead. But let's seriously move over to the Atlantic 10 Conference,
oh my God,
which maybe should be relegated down to under the radar. Nobody in the top 80 of the net right now. But Fordham is 11-1. Titel, UMass had a nice 8-2 under Frank Martin.
So if you have ever had a 5-point home loss to UMass Lowell, and most people have not, thank God, you do have to bounce back, which they did by blowing out Hofstra in Brooklyn. They do get the rest of this week to rest out, and then a very tough game against North Texas in Springfield, Mass. This Saturday. They might be better off actually getting on the bus and going somewhere, because Angry Frank somehow 2-2 at home, but 6-0 away from home. Unreal. They're doing it without senior point guard Noah Fernandez. He's missed the past 3 games with a sprained right ankle. Hopefully he'll be ready to go this weekend. And if not, they're going to get it done with depth. They get 47% of their minutes from their bench. That's number 1 in the nation.
Yeah, I excused the Towson home loss. I think Towson's a pretty decent team, but losing to Lowell at home is inexcusable. That's
Lowell, a decent under the radar team by America East standards.
They're a nice middle of the pack under America East team. Exactly.
Okay, this conference is not good. Like it's very odd to think that the A10 might not have a single team inside the bubble. But the story of the league, other than UMass, Chad, pull up Fordham.
You don't want to see their resume. Just talk about. Well, I'll pull it up, but it's a very nice overall record at 11-1. Yeah. Griggs, that's what I'll tell you. Okay, they've done nothing to win at Tulane.
Yeah, every win. And I just want the fact that they're beating anyone is a story, and the fact that they're 11-1, a good record. But all of that, like all but 2 wins. Or excuse me, all but 3. Wow. Maine cracking the top 200. When did that happen? Good grief. Okay, all but 3 coming outside the
come on, Griggs. We got to. They picked up home wins over Maine and New Hampshire. That's something that Boston College could not even do.
Hey, so Wagner's the auto bid out of the NEC right now.
Yeah, Titel, how many strikes does this team have? With a schedule like that,
I don't know.
Titel, can they have any shot if they win out of getting an at-large bid? I think
they win out. Yeah. Still. They win out. Yeah.
I do as the next best thing to an undefeated team, Chad, is a one-loss team.
Okay. 2 losses and they're gone though, huh?
Yes.
Probably.
Well, the second will be in the conference tournament, so they're done
Yeah.
already. Let's yeah, this is the rest of the upcoming schedule. This conference, which we may not be discussing much on the on this show. We may be moving this to the end of the radar show pretty soon. It's just been a
That
horrible
is-
year so far for the
oh,
A10.
That tournament's going to be lit.
On that note, let's go to final thoughts before we turn this down. Touch. Let me go to you first because I know you have a picture you want me to bring up here. But final thoughts, I'll start with you.
So my final thought is going to be a shout out for Hansel Emmanuel, the 6'6" freshman guard at Northwestern State. He made the first 2 baskets of his career in his team's win over Louisiana Monroe on Saturday night. But the reason that this one-handed dunk is making all the highlight shows is because I don't know how easy it is for you to tell there. I think it is that he has only one hand. He lost his left arm in a childhood accident. He had a pile of cinder blocks fall on him and they had to amputate his arm. Horrible story, but a great ending so far, or a great story at least. The Demons are 8-2. If they win the Southland, which is tough but possible, the amount of national exposure this kid's going to get in March is going to be a handful.
Buzzer! Come
You're
on.
done.
I'm going to pull this down here at Joby.
All right, so we hinted at this, but Chad, you did not update the J&G midday. And the shame of that is,
I thought I did actually, but go ahead.
the shame of it is number 362 on the J&G is now your Louisville Cardinal, and 363 is your Cal Bears. What a I have never seen one team, like even in Pitt's, even when Stallings was leading Pitt, I have not seen a Power 5 team this low, this late. And you don't have one, but you have 2 of these guys. I mean, it is remarkable in last and second to last. Wow. By sheer force of playing against the Pac-12 and the ACC, they will not wind up 362 and 363 because the strength of schedule will move up. But so I say, enjoy it while we have it. This wondrous time between Bears and Cardinals.
As we record this, by the way, Syracuse did hold on to beat Monmouth. Rice just missed a shot at the buzzer that could have won the game for them. They're going to overtime at Texas, by the way. Not a good sign for Texas with everything going on. But Dorman.
Good lead-in, Chad. Thank you. I didn't give my comments on the Texas situation to open the show, and I'm not going to until I hear more on what's exactly the facts are and stuff. But what I will say on the court is the effects that this will have on the team and the rest of the coaching staff. Because as a team and as a basketball situation, this Texas team was Final Four good. They had hopes of a huge season. They moved into a brand new, beautiful building and finally put the students on right off the court. And the place had been rocking against Gonzaga. And this is bad because of what they could have been this year. Chad just gave you the score. They're going to overtime against Rice in a game they should have won easily. What this will do to the team and the kids, just not right. I feel bad for the kids in an awful situation.
Yeah, and it's tough to have to be playing a game the day that
Absolutely.
this stuff happens. If this game was Wednesday night, I think it would be a different scenario even, because at least would have given Rodney Terry, who's taken over for tonight, at least time to start building the team around him. But Salika, you're up.
I know it feels kind of cruel and callous to go the direction for my own final thought, but I'm going to go back to Louisville for a moment. If they weren't already on pace to have a record low crowd for Saturday against Florida A&M, also keep in mind that is the same day of the Wasabi Fenway Bowl in Boston, where they take on the Cincinnati Bearcats. On the bright side, at least the game tickets and parking, even though parking is actually more than the tickets, there's a rare chance to get into Fenway. I'm sure Coach Scott Satterfield will, he went up to Cincinnati.
Yeah. Greg, you want to finish us off here?
Yeah. Also, setting the low bar, getting back to the Atlantic 10, it's very possible, if not probable, the way that it's shaping up, that they will have no one inside the bubble or anywhere near it unless someone just absolutely blows through the conference and gets to the 25, 26 wins and gets themselves in there. And it's kind of disappointing to see a basketball centric conference, arguably the biggest or most important outside of the Big East and maybe the West Coast Conference, you don't have that much lack of success. There's a lot of good stories in there. St. Bonaventure's got a good fan base. Dayton, a rich tradition and a rich fan base. You got Big Five teams in there. You got SLU, who's got a good following. You got the Arch Baron Cup. They're in some of the big cities. I've always wondered why the league wasn't better than what it was, even though it's normally better than this. But how the hell is it so bad this year? Oh my God.
Yeah, it is down, and like I mentioned a couple of times, I don't know if we're going to be discussing it. We might be real getting it under the radar
Yeah.
pretty soon. But
Yeah.
on that note, I do want to take this chance to thank everybody for joining us. We will be back Wednesday night with an under the radar show. We will not do the 8-10 there this week, maybe next up. But
Yeah.
on behalf of David Dorman and John Titel up here, Joby Fortson, John Stalika, and David Briggs to his sides, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.